Hi guys, I'm Shmee, hello and welcome back to the channel where you join me here in JDM paradise. Today I'm at HJA, the largest specialist in JDM cars in Europe, to experience for the first time a legend in the form of this truly iconic car behind me, the Bayside Blue R34 GT-R V-Spec. Now before we get out on the road for my first ever drive in an R34, we're going to take a look around here at HJA, quite literally filled with JDM legends. We have all of the different Skyline generations, the R32s, 33s and 34s, we have the Subarus and the Evos, we have Supras, we have RX-7s, plus we have the holy grail of R33s here in the form of the £1.6 million 400R, one of only 40 in existence in total, a truly rare car. We'll take a look at that as well, and then of course it'll be time to get out onto the road in the Bayside Blue R34 to see what it's like and whether one day I should be buying a JDM legend like this. I must confess, and you'll possibly already know this if you've been following my channel for a while, but JDM cars are not my typical forte. Of course, I can tell the difference between an R34, an R32, an R33, some of the Evos, but typically at car events, I'm drawn towards the more European exotica normally. However, today at HJA, I'm here with Tom from the Schmuseum. We've been having a little look around, and safe to say, Tom is much more in his element, so for an exploration, we are here with Tom.
How you doing, guys? I know you're wondering why I'm here. It's mostly for the 400R. As you know, this is the kind of stuff I grew up with, you know, from sort of 13, 14, 15 years on. All of my friends had Subarus, Evos, Pulsars, and I've always wanted to see one, so I'm very glad I've now been able to make that happen.
Well, I know from the little walk we've just had that you know a lot about many of the cars here.
I know a little bit about a little bit, but yeah, I think we could probably take a walk around and show the guys some of what we've got here. So
definitely.
Starting at the back, we have a pair of Tommy Mackinnon Evos 6s, which are incredibly rare cars. This one is really rather special for a number of reasons. First, it's one owner from new, which was Mitsubishi UK themselves, signed by Tommy Mackinnon. And if ever you've seen a review or read a review about one of these cars, it's this exact car. And it's actually number 6. Obviously, Evo 6, Mitsubishi kept 6 for themselves. And here, we have number 1 ever made. So, quite an incredible pairing we have there.
Number 1 and number 6. And the even more incredible thing is that there's a third one upstairs.
There is indeed, so
3 of the 50.
Yes, all in one room.
6% of them. So number 6, number 1, and a pair here of, again, rare cars.
Yes, very. This is the R33 GT-R LM. Now, you can tell that because it's in champion blue, which is pretty much the only change they made for this edition, other than the addition of the flap on the bonnet, and you've also got the GTR badge on the C-pillar down there as well. So not a huge change for these, but you can tell straight away by the colour that they're quite a rare car.
And 2 R34s?
2 R34s, both V-Specs. So both of these are actually sold and now heading to America, which is quite unsurprising really, given the 25 year is coming up very soon. They're becoming very popular out there, ready for when they can be registered.
And the one at the back is, I think it's lightning yellow, isn't it?
Yes, which is an incredibly rare colour, and there's not many in that. Most of them black, white, Bayside blue.
Yeah.
So to see one in that colour is very unusual, shall we say. Moving on, R32 GT-R, arguably the car that started what most people know as the Skyline GT-R lineage. Released in 1989, it had 4-wheel steering, 4-wheel drive, massively ahead of its time. Things we think of as quite normal today.
Yeah, back in the late 80s.
Yes.
So that's where it began, and alongside it is where I guess it went, you could say.
Yes, this is probably one of the rarest of R34 GT-Rs. This is actually a V-Spec II Nur. Now, that's standing for Nürburgring, or Nur, as you may call it. You can tell it's a V-Spec II due to the carbon nacoduct on the bonnet. And speaking of bonnet, I think we should probably lift it up because underneath is quite special. Now, on most, or in fact on all regular RB26s, which obviously these have under the bonnet, they have a red cam cover. But on these, they're gold to signify the difference. And also the chassis plaque is gold as well on these.
So we're looking at 2.6 litre twin turbo straight 6.
Yes. And this one obviously being an NUR has a version of the N1 engine, so it's got some forged components in it and can go to slightly higher power levels than the standard car.
Which is confusing to begin with because all of the cars from this era in Japan kind of had that agreement.
Yes. Everything they said they wouldn't produce a car with more than 280 horsepower. So on paper, all of these were 276 horsepower. However, on anyone's dyno, more like 330, 340.
A little bit more.
Yes. Moving on, we have an Evos 7 here. This is an RS variant. Now, this is the lightweight one with no air conditioning, and it's a bit stripped out. And speaking of how stripped out these come, something you probably won't have seen in quite a long time, has wind down windows.
Yeah.
So that is how far they've gone with the weight saving on this particular example. So,
taking the weight out of it.
yes.
We should talk about the two we've just walked around.
We should. So here we have an R33 GT-R once again. This is in a custom colour actually. So one of the previous owners resprayed this into this gunmetal grey and also fitted an R34 gearbox to it. So it's actually a 6-speed rather than a 5-speed like most of them are.
Yeah, make it a little bit quicker, hey?
Yes. And then of course, once again, talking of legendary rally cars, here we have of course the Impreza 22B based on the 2-door WRX STI with the wider body kit and of course the 2.2 litre engine, hence the 22B naming.
Makes sense. And the crazy thing is a lot of these cars are quickly appreciating in value at the moment.
Very quickly. I mean, 2 to 3 years ago, it's fair to say most of the cars in this room were probably half the value they are now, if not more.
Which is bizarre. We're going to come quickly to the race car side of things before we go to the 400R. Quick few words on these from me, I suppose. They're actually cars that have come from Japan, the 355 Challenge and the 360 Challenge. This is actually road legal. This has been road legalized. It's had the conversions made that are required to pretty wild Italian cars in here also.
Yes, I can't imagine driving that one on the road. But speaking of wild, here we have the Friends Racing R34. Now this is actually the record holder for the 0 to 300 km/h sprint, as you can see, in 11.8 seconds.
That's really fast, 186 miles an hour.
Yes, producing
faster than most hypercars.
Incredibly faster than most. I mean, that's sort of Koenigsegg territory for, you know, where they are. And, you know, with sort of 1400 horsepower on tap and turbos the size of, well, the size of most engines themselves, you can understand how it kind of does that. Now, this has actually got quite a clever electronic system on it where it will launch in all-wheel drive, and then halfway through or part-way through the run, it will switch to rear drive only to prevent the drivetrain loss and get the quicker acceleration. Makes sense, makes sense. And then next to it? Here we have the Sunline Racing GT-R, which this one runs about 650 horsepower, so a much more sensible power figure. Full carbon body on this one. And crucially, if we come inside and have a look, speaking of gearboxes, like on the R33, this has had quite the change that it's had a sequential gearbox put in it. So this has purely been made with speed in mind, going through the gears as quickly as possible, not necessarily the driver involvement of most of them.
You can see even on the bodywork, the way it's designed like this.
Yes, it's quite extreme.
And then tucked in behind?
Tucked in behind here we have another effectively race car. This car was owned and raced by Middlehurst Nissan. Now, I don't know if anyone knows, but Middlehurst were the UK importers for Skylines in the UK. So if ever you did have a UK spec Skyline, it would have come through them. So this was one of their cars, and the guys at HJ are actually going to be putting this back to Bayside Blue, which was the original colour, and doing a full restoration on it, ready for this to go off to a new home.
Bring it back to spec. And I suppose we should also talk about the car that we're here to look at today.
We should, yes,
the
of course.
R34 V-Spec.
In the famous Bayside Blue, I think probably the most recognisable colour. If you think of a Skyline, you think of a Bayside Blue R34. This is what you have in your head.
What's particularly rare about this car that HJA have available at the moment is that it's basically stock with the exception of the exhaust.
It is, which is incredibly rare. Now, to say you've got a stock R34 or any Skyline of any description really, they've always got wheels, air filters, exhaust. There's always something done to them. But other than the exhaust, this is completely stock, which is why the one we've come to have a look at today, for you to get to experience the car itself and not the modifications, so to speak.
As it begins. Shall we pop open the bonnet of this one?
I think we should.
Just have a quick look at the regular, if we can call it that, power plant.
This is where we will be able to see, obviously, the red cam cover of the regular RB26 that we have under here.
There we go, yeah, I see the difference.
Yeah.
Looks pretty good though.
It does, and obviously the regular GT-R actually has ceramic propellers in the turbos as well, as opposed to steel in something like the N1 or the NUR engines, which were changed for reliability at higher speeds.
Interesting. You see, you do know quite a lot, Tom.
I know a little bit about a lot. You know.
Let's go and head through then and take a look at the 400R.
Yeah, so see what we're really here for.
This is it then.
Here we have the legend, the beast, the R33 400R. Now, if anybody has ever played Gran Turismo in their life, you've probably driven this car around a circuit of some description. And I think that's where most of us fell in love with it, right? This is a significant change over a regular R33. Now, to start with the significant changes, obviously we have the body kit all the way around, the wheels, and it's not just a body kit, shall we say? It's actually all significantly changed. It's actually a carbon fiber bonnet that we have on here, as you may be able to tell from the paint on top. But full carbon fiber bonnet, and crucially, if you have a look, that does not say RB26 on top, it does on front. That says RBX GT2, because this is the engine that effectively came from the GT1 Le Mans race cars. And it's been bored and stroked to 2.8 litres. It runs 400 horsepower, hence the 400R designation. And yeah, it's had a lot of work go through this extensively, even to the point where it has carbon fibre drive shafts. That's how extreme they've gone with this.
Interesting, because they had made the one homologation car they had to make, right?
Yeah, so for the racing purposes, to go racing, they had to make one GT-R LM Limited, which I believe actually sold basically to themselves. But as were the regulations at the time, only one car had to be made, unlike today where it's a significantly larger number.
But there are not exactly many of these either.
There's not. So they claim to build 44 of these, but through the GTR registry, only 40 have ever been confirmed, this being number 40. So as it currently stands, this is the last one known to ever be built.
Yeah, so the missing numbers quite literally are number 41 through to number 44. So the chances are they never existed.
Quite possibly, yes.
And we're looking at the last one.
We are, and it's incredibly special. I mean, if we come and take a look inside as well, because the changes don't just stop on the outside. So if you have a look through, we've obviously got the 400R bucket seats, gear knob, steering wheel, the 320 km/h speedo, and if you look at the rev counter, unlike most GTRs that go up to 10, this one goes all the way up to 11. Bit cliche, but it's quite a nice little touch that they've done there.
It sure is, and I mean this is valued at £1.6 million.
It is. It's a very valuable car, and again, a number of years ago, quite a number of years ago, this probably would have been £50,000. You know,
Yeah.
and it's now 1.6 million.
There's just been huge moves in the JDM world, really. I mean, cars like the GT-R Skylines, but also cars like these.
Is that a Supra?
Yeah, quite literally.
This is obviously a Toyota Supra RZ 2JZ engine. It has the 3-litre twin turbo, manual 6-speed gearbox. And this is quite an incredible car as well, because this only has 9,000 kilometres from new, about 6,000 miles.
And it's fairly stock also.
It is. This is completely stock, which is incredibly rare to find, which again, if we pop the bonnet of this one as well, when I say to you it's done 6,000 miles, catches there somewhere, when you pop the bonnet, it actually looks like it's done 6 miles.
Yeah.
Not 6,000, just 6.
That is clean. 2JZ.
The very famous engine, the one that everybody wants.
Looks perfect.
So that there is incredibly special as well. And well, there's more upstairs, so I think we should probably go and have a look up there.
The craziest thing about it is we're only halfway through, so let's head on up and go and see what else we can find.
There's even more to see up here, and I have no idea where do we even begin. I'll tell you what, let's start right here. Silvia S15. It's a car that typically is known for going very, very sideways. I'm sure you've even seen some drift events with these going around. But unusually, this one is actually in a circuit specification, so it doesn't really want to go sideways and it wants to go around corners quite quickly.
And I've spotted something very typically Japanese about it too.
I know what you're going to say.
The seats.
Yes. Once again, the driver's seat has been replaced for a bucket, and who cares about the passenger?
The passengers don't need to be held in with good support. But next to it is a Brabus SL 500.
This is more your wheelhouse.
Yeah, Brabus SL 500. Those are shooting up as well, original Brabuses. What do we have lurking behind?
Here we have, over in the corner, we have another R32 GT-R. Here we have a Mazda RX-7, again made very famous from the original Fast and Furious movie, driven by Dom in that film. And there we have the third Tommy Mackinnon Evo.
Like the car next to it.
Yes.
Is that a V-Spec II?
You would think so, but no, it isn't. Well spotted, because obviously it has the NACA duct on the bonnet, which would usually signify a V-Spec II, but this one is actually an M-Spec.
Right.
Now, M-Spec is effectively the comfort spec. It came with what they call ripple control dampers, what we now know as probably magnetic ride. So it was the comfort spec, M standing for Mizuno, the chief engineer of the company, but this one has had the V-Spec II bonnet put on it. So
Okay.
that is why you got confused.
And the colour,
The colour is known as silica brass, which is a
Okay.
colour only available on the M-Spec, which is kind of a giveaway as to what this really is.
Makes sense.
So, and over in the corner we have another Supra lurking. That one's a little bit naughty with about 900 horsepower and
Casual.
a turbo the size of my head.
Yeah, why not?
Huge. Another R32 GT-R V-Spec. This one has been fairly heavily modified as well. You can see the front mount intercooler down there, the interior completely stripped, the roll cage. It's quite extreme, this one.
Yeah.
Here we have, very similar to the one downstairs, this is an Evo 10 RS. So once again, the lightweight model, manual gearbox, the one for frills. And then again, another one of its rivals, the Impreza. This one's actually a version 6 WRX STI in yellow, which again, is quite a rare color to find them in.
And a bold spec with the gold wheels against the yellow.
Yes, it's certainly quite different, but I think gold wheels and Subarus kind of go hand in hand together, don't they? You can't not. I think we should probably swing round behind again, where we have another R33 LM.
Yep.
And a 300ZX, which I think in the early 90s was a car that was very, very popular here in the UK. Very easy entry-level performance.
Yeah.
So a way to go quite quickly for not very much. Another V-Spec R34. So they're quite common around here, aren't they?
You'd almost think they weren't rare cars.
Yes, yes. And guess what we've got there?
Yeah, exactly.
An R34 V-Spec. So there's quite a
White
few
on
of
white.
these laying around in white. So it actually looks really, really good in white with the white wheels. Maybe that's just me.
No, I think it works.
Here we have another silver. This is an S13 Tommy Kyra. So it's got the full Tommy Kyra kit around it, a little bit more power, it's got the seats, and crucially, for 1989, it's an active rear spoiler.
You put an active rear spoiler on back then.
Yes. Which again
Wow.
is something we think of today, but the JDM stuff really was so ahead of its time.
Yeah.
Coming over here, we have another Evo 10, but this one is the final edition. So they made 400 of these, the last of the run, 2015 car, and crucially, manual gearbox, not the flappy paddle that wasn't very good in these, if we're being completely honest.
That looks a bit mad.
It does, doesn't it? And you would think, looking at this, that this has got to be a 1500 horsepower monster. Actually, it's got about 400. So it's got more visual modifications on this than actual upgrades. But
And a massive exhaust, gigantic wing, those wide fenders up front. Yeah. they
doesn't
won't hold it
necessarily make sense, but
back. Why not?
each to their own. And once again, here we have a Corolla. And again, talking of ahead of its time, right? This had active cooling. So once this got up to temperature and needed some air, the front grill opens.
Amazing.
So it is so fun to see just how ahead of their time they were in every area.
I think that's what you see a lot with the Japanese cars that we've seen here. Things like the high-cast four-wheel
Four-wheel
steering,
steer,
the
yep.
four-wheel drive, the dashboard gauges and charts and things,
Yes.
the active cooling and spoilers. It
It's,
didn't really arrive on other cars until a decade later.
yeah, it's incredible to see, you know, when you think of most supercars and the features they have, these all had them.
Well, I know what we need to do now is to head back downstairs and get ready to go out in the R34 GT-R.
Let's go for a drive.
Let's do it. Let's step in then. Okay, I have been a passenger in an R34. You've been in these a few times, right, Tom?
I have, yeah, I've driven these a number of years ago, but
So,
it's all very nostalgic.
get comfortable. This car's done a few miles, or rather kilometers. But this is the thing, right? All of the displays and temps and readouts and things. So, let's start it. Yes, you can tell that's got a different exhaust. So, did I close that hard enough?
No.
No, there we go. Let's go out for a little run then in the R34 GT-R. Unfortunately for us, the weather today is all over the place. It is spectacularly windy. There are trees down on the ground everywhere, so we need to be a little bit careful. We've been driving for a couple of miles to get this warmed up. One of the things that took me a moment to remind myself is that being a Japanese car, obviously the stalks are the opposite way around. So your wipers are on the left and your indicators are on the right, which does take just a moment to think about. But for me, it's quite exciting to be in one of these. Tom, being back in it, how does it feel?
Incredibly nostalgic. The noises, the smells, the way the turbo comes in, it's all coming back to me.
Look at this, a bit of tree down.
Yeah, we've got
Far
some
from
heavy
ideal.
winds.
Yeah. Anyway, gonna watch out just because of all the branches on the ground, but that turbo sound that you hear coming in Smiles, and then the wastegate noise as well. Yeah, I'm just taking it easy through here. I know the road is going to open up a little bit more around the other side, but it's a strange clutch pedal feel. The bite point is quite high, just needs a little bit of a getting used to, but it's very, it's very, let's say, unintimidating.
Another tree down. Fortunately, we have room.
This is your unusual test drive in a car. There's another one just here as well. This is a very, very, very unusual way to test drive a car. We'll make our way through, carefully does it. But what I love, I think, the most is that this is a car from 1999. This is 23 years old. Look at all the displays and gadgetry and screens and data, and you can change that through a few different modes, can't you?
Indeed. So we just pop mode one, various different views that come up, and it even has a G meter.
A G meter in 23 years ago. I mean, nowadays, obviously, it's quite normal to see the latest range of cars with different things like this, digital screens that show you whatever data you want to see. But back then, this was like, well, the R35 as I know it. This was so far ahead of anything else. And it's also tiny on the road, by the way. I mean, like all older cars. I guess it was a big car at the time, but even down these literally tiny, tiny, tiny roads by modern standards, it feels really quite small. Thankfully, it opens up a little bit so we can, once we've gone over all of these branches and bits of wood that are just everywhere, we can open it up a little bit more. Oh, that's cool. You just need to drive it like it's a rear-wheel drive car because of the way it's biased, right? You need to
it's four-wheel drive, but it is a heavily rear-biased system. So that was the thing. They were famed in the day for being very electronically controlled and virtually uncrashable.
Look at this weather.
Which
the
is
sun
not
with
the
the
case.
sideways rain in the wind. This is bonkers. This is an absolutely bonkers day to be out for a drive.
Probably the ideal car to be out for the drive-in, though.
Quite a fun car. Better than being in a supercar on Cup 2Rs.
Yes.
That's for sure. It is actually quite amazing how many trees are down everywhere. Listen to that. And the pops you get as well. Okay, so I'm adjusting to this and I'm quite enjoying it. It is, as you were saying, Tom, quite GT8-esque. You know, you're driving the car.
Yes. It doesn't do anything for you.
Exactly. It's not like, you know, modern cars where it's all basically the car sorting everything out.
Which I find really funny because when it came out, it was, you know, hailed as this electronic beast that did everything for you and drove itself, but it really doesn't.
But maybe that's why I like it, because for 1998, when it was originally launched, it was that. But that's where everything else got 10 years later, which is when I started driving, right?
Yeah,
Mine
true.
and your era, when we were, well, teenagers going on young 20s. That's about the level of tech that was in this, but from 10 years before.
Very true.
Kind of funny when you think about it like that, isn't it? Like, being so far ahead of its time. And it's why the R35, which really carried on that same level of tech for the next generation, was called by so many the Veyron killer, you know, Godzilla.
Yeah.
Because it did the same, but now that's become like the normal level of technology and performance out of cars at, well, that kind of price bracket, or even more expensive still, to be honest.
Yeah, very true. Systems have come a long way, and as you said, it's become fairly normal, but...
I nearly ran for the wrong store. I'm going to go all the way around the roundabout, but I was definitely went for the one on the left when I should have gone for the one on the right. That does take a little bit of getting used to.
The worst thing is when you own a Japanese car and a regular UK car, and then you're jumping between them, and can never remember. You're always getting it wrong.
I can imagine. It feels good. And so this being a V-Spec, I know visually it's got an R-Spec front bumper.
This does have an R-Spec front bumper from Nismo, yes.
So this has the R-Spec bumper, but V-Spec means slightly stiffer suspension than the standard car.
Pretty much, yeah. There was slightly stiffer suspension, a couple other little bits and pieces they tweaked.
And V-Spec 2 goes even further.
V-Spec 2 is even stiffer still. And then obviously has the carbon knacker duct in the bonnet.
Yeah.
And again, a couple other little bits and pieces which were then made standard on the rest of the range after the V-Spec 2 came out. Yeah. But obviously the V-Spec retained the stiffer suspension still.
Yeah, so if anybody's wondering, by the way, about the rattling noise that you can hear, that's actually the number plate. That's not the car.
No.
So all is fine.
Unfortunately, nothing we can do about that, but we do, as a legal requirement, need to have them there.
Yeah, so we'll probably head back towards base. This was really just a short test drive, and I think if we've avoided the trees, we've done pretty well today. That's kind of goal number one. And yeah, I have some thoughts about the first ever drive in an R34. With an open road, we need to try and push this a little bit harder. So I tell you what, it's pretty good fun. Obviously we're talking, what, low 300s horsepower? Not huge numbers, but it does sound the part.
But so enough.
Just like plenty enough. So let's do exactly the same again. Open road. It's funny when you feel the turbo come in. The car it reminds me of in that fashion, and this might be controversial to say, is the F40, which was the same kind of era.
No, I get that.
Early 90s, but
again, very heavily turbocharged.
Yeah, but you really, really get that sense of the turbos coming in. It's very different to driving, you know, like a modern turbo Ferrari engine, let's say.
Yeah.
Which is a completely different feel. Just seeing all these branches and yeah.
Anything modern with a turbocharger, you know, basically there's no lag, it just goes.
Yeah. Completely different to this time when it's hard to explain, but I don't know where exactly it is in the rev range that you feel it, but when it does go, it just starts coming, and then when you lift off, obviously you get the lovely wastegate sounds. I didn't expect it to be so fun. I did not expect this car to be as fun as it is. That's actually taken me very pleasantly by surprise. I'm not complaining about that side of it, and I'm getting the hang of the indicators as well. I did actually own a Japanese car way back. I used to have a Subaru Leone from 1987 when I was in New Zealand for a while. And I think at that time I did get familiar with it. But yeah, you know, this car's done some good mileage, or kilometers I should say, so it's ready to...
Forget how much it pins you back to the seat for a relatively small power figure.
Yeah.
When that turbo comes in, you know it.
It's really, really quite fun to drive. We've got back at exactly the right time. It is now pouring with rain outside.
Forget the weather. Skyline. Skyline, what did you think? You've now driven the legend, Godzilla the Beast.
I've been taken aback. I've been surprised by it. I've enjoyed driving it, and I think that's what you expected.
I did say I think you're going to like it more than you think you will.
I think we should have a look at the engine bay in this as well, because it's slightly different to the V-Spec II that we checked out earlier.
Yes.
Obviously, as we mentioned, this has the R-Spec bumper, which means you get these additional openings, and it just looks slightly different. If I grab this...
So once again, you will see that this is the regular RB26 from the red cam cover now.
Yeah.
Not gold as it is on the N1 spec engine.
It is funny when it comes to the horsepower and this kind of, as you said, gentleman's agreement that all the JDM cars had.
276, yes. When, yeah, you put them on a dyno and 276 becomes 330, 340, 320, somewhere in that ballpark.
Which is a lot, because it's easy to forget that percentage-wise, you know, that's more than 10% up. Modern cars, you expect them to be slightly up because they're measured on horrible fuel in hot temperatures, etc., etc. But when you're talking 600, 700, it's easy to get 10%, or to get 30 horsepower up, I should say.
And again, when we're talking this far back, you know, back in 1999 or even beyond, further beyond that still, it was an awful lot of power that they were making. Yeah.
Just drives well. So I know a lot of cars lock out the four-wheel steering, don't they?
A lot of owners do choose to lock out the four-wheel steering just for reliability issues. But again, there are still a few out there that have it.
Yeah, this has been, well, I think visually, V-Spec, Bayside Blue is like the icon.
It's the poster car. If you think of a Skyline or a GT-R, this is exactly what you have in your head.
Yeah, one of those. What an amazing day then to have come down to HJA, to be in the presence of so many JDM legends, all of the different cars, and to have experienced for my first time driving an R34 GT-R, as well as coming to see this unicorn of a car, the R33 400R. Truly, truly special. Now, when it comes to cars like this is of course the iconic spec, as we were saying, but cars like this have appreciated in value so much in recent years. That's partly driven by the 25-year import rule in the USA. A car like this is just coming on 23 years old. In 2 years' time, it can be imported over to the US, which has really driven the values up. I think probably about double now what they were around 3 years ago. What happens in the future, though, remains to be seen. Will that double again in the next 3 years, in which case it's much better to get on board with them now rather than waiting. But who knows with all of these things. All I know is it took me rather by surprise. I've quite enjoyed that. Let's see what the future holds. For now though, that is all. A big thanks to the team at HJA for the opportunity to take that out for a run. A big thanks to Tom as well for joining and sharing some of his knowledge about the JDM cars. What a day, some legendary stuff to take a look at. But that's it for this time, and I'll see you again very soon. Cheers!